If you look at the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, you will find many verses, many ahadith forbidding and warning us from engaging in any kind of argument. الذين يجادلون في آيات الله بغير سلطان أتاهم كبر مقتا عند الله وعند الذين آمنوا كذلك يطبع الله على كل قلب متكبر جبار. In Surah Ghafir verse 35. Look at Surah Shura verse 35 as well. Look at Surah Ghafir again verse 4 and verse 56. All of these verses talk about that the kuffar are the one who like to argue. And they argue for the sake of defeating the haqq and supporting the falsehood. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Ya Aisha, if you see those who argue in the Quran and argue about the religion, they are the one Allah mentioned in the Quran, so be aware of them. أولئك الذين سماهم الله فاحذرون. This the one في قلوبهم زيغ. This the one with their heart doubts. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he found that the Sahaba argue over when is Laylatul Qadr is, he was so angry to the extent his face كأنما يتفلق من حب الرمان. He became like a pomegranate. His face became so red that the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, are you been created for that purpose, to argue with each other? Is that what I ordered you to be? That you argue with each other, everyone use a verse against the other? And he was so angry that Ibn Umar said, I never in my life wished that I missed one of the Prophet ﷺ gathering except this gathering. I wish that I wasn't with the crowd. I wasn't with the Prophet at that time. He was very angry. And he said, the most hated person, and the first hadith is Sahih, and this also Bukhari Muslim, the most hated person to Allah, al-aladul khasim, the one who liked to argue over everything, and very aggressive in their arguing when they argue with others. And also in Sunan Abi Dawud, al-mira'u fil Qur'ani kufr, wal-jidalu fil Qur'ani kufr. Those who argue over the Qur'an and basically with no knowledge, with no right intention, this is a form of kufr. Yani it is the attitude of the kuffar, the actions and the way of the kuffar. Abdul Rahman ibn Mahdi said, I remember all the scholars that I met in my life. They advise us not to argue. The same thing with Abu Zinad. أدركنا أهل الفضل منا يحذروننا من الجدل. As a matter of fact, Imam Ahmad, when he said the fundamentals of the Sunnah, the foundation of the Sunnah, he said all, and he mentioned following the companion of the Prophet ﷺ, leaving the innovations. Then he said third one, and you leave argumentation. You don't argue with Ahlul Bidah, and don't argue in general. Number 5. Al-Imam al-Baghawi rahimahullah summarized it by saying, al-ulama, all of them agree that arguing is not a good quality. And arguing over Allah's attributes and arguing over the nature of Allah is something is forbidden. This is one side. In the other side, Al-Quran says, وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. In Surah Al-Nahl, argue with them in the best manner. وَتِلْكَ حُجَّتُنَا آتَيْنَاهَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ عَلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ. We give Ibrahim the ability to argue very well. In Surah Al-An'am 83 and Surah Al-Baqarah 258, he gives us that beautiful debate between Ibrahim and the king in Namrud. He said, if Allah bring the sun from the east, you bring it from the west. That's an argument. That's right. He argued with his father. He argued with his people. Hey, look at these idols. The big one is the one who destroyed them. In Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 63. What about Musa? Didn't he argue with Fir'aun back and forth? قال فرعون وما رب العالمين قال رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما إن كنتم موقنين. Look at Surah Al-Shu'ara. قالوا يا نوح قد جادلتنا فأكثرت جدالنا. Nuh, You argue with us. And you argue a lot with us. In Surah Hud, verse 32. Didn't the Prophet ﷺ told us that Adam and Musa debated one another? That's our argument. That's right. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he argued with the Jews in Sahih al-Bukhari. And that's something al-Bukhari mentioned is Sahih, in showing that arguing with other people is acceptable. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Jahidul mushrikeen, with your tongue. How with your tongue? By replying to them, arguing with them. Didn't al-ulama argue with each other? Didn't al-fuqaha debate one another, the Muslim jurists? Didn't Ibn Abbas argue with the Khawarij? Didn't Ali radiallahu anhu argue with the Khawarij? Didn't Awza'i rahimahullah made a big debate between him and one of the Qadariyah? Al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah debated Hafs al-Fard in a beautiful debate. Al-Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, he argued with the shubuhat, the doubts of the Jahmiyyah. Where will you do with all this? Umar ibn Abdul Aziz said, ما رأيت أحدا لاح الرجال إلا أخذ بجوامع الكلم. I have not seen a young man who argue with people who are much experienced than him unless that person became so smart. So, what do we do? Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah brought some of these evidence and more, and he said, look at this. This is like two oceans of evidence facing one another. Like two big waves of evidence crashing each other. In order for you to understand how to basically to understand those, you will know that, I will just give you the summary of it. Arguing is based on two things: intention and the way you argue. Wasila wa niyya. Because we always argue with each other. And pay attention to this. So if this is two things, that means al-qisma ruba'iyya. It means you have four scenarios. That's right? So here we say that arguing either for truth, you argue for the truth, by the truth. للحق بالحق. So the intention is correct and the way you argue is correct. It's for truth. Or you argue for something invalid, something falsehood, using a falsehood arguing or argumentation. Using a falsehood arguing. ايش الصفة منها؟ ها؟ أن تجادل بالباطل للباطل. So you argue with falsehood for falsehood. You argue with truth for the truth. The third, can anybody think of the third scenario? You argue with the truth for the falsehood. Or you argue with falsehood for the truth. Make sense? Make sense? تجادل بالحق للحق بالباطل للباطل بالحق للباطل بالباطل للحق. You argue with truth for the truth. You argue with falsehood for the falsehood. You argue with falsehood for the truth. You argue with truth for the falsehood. Break it down. First one, you argue for the truth with the truth. This one, I have a question for you guys before I go further. From these four, which one you think a Sharia praise and which one a Sharia criticize? Praise number one. And the other three are something criticized. Something not good. That's right? That's right? You agree? I agree with Kabir, but I will say not 100%. I'll say even number one is not fully praised, believe it or not. Number one, you argue for the truth with the truth. Al-ulama said with the condition, إذا كانت المصلحة راجحة, if there is a greater benefit. They said yes. Like what? Learning. I argue with my sheikh because I want to learn. I'll do the devil advocate, I said, or take the other position, just to know how to answer this. That's what Umar ibn Aziz praised. Another scenario which is acceptable, you argue with the truth for the truth when you argue لإقامة الحجة, when the judge argue with the criminal. When the judge, let's say somebody came in front of the judge, he was accused that this person said a statement that take him out of Islam. The judge has to back and forth with that person, asking him, why did he say that? Try to convince him to repent. Like what Ibn Abbas did with the Khawarij. Or when you debate someone, basically, before you apply the judgment. So Ali did this before he fought Al-Khawarij. Umar ibn Aziz debated, Al-Awza'i debated the Qadari before Umar ibn Aziz executed that man. He wanted to give him a fair chance, a trial. So that debate took place with the innovators. But when there is no great benefit, actually there is risk. Even if you argue with the truth for the truth, Al-Ulama rahimahullah said you cannot argue. Like what? قالوا مجادلة الضعيف العاجز. Someone who want to go into a debate or want to argue with someone and you're not a good debater. Even though you're going to use the correct evidence and your intention is good, but you're weak, you don't know how to argue. You don't know how to win a debate. In this case, be quiet because you might mislead others. You don't know how to answer. It's like this guy was in Rice University that day. Somebody was telling him, oh, your prophet married this number. He said, no, the prophet only married one woman. He married 9. He said, each one of them died, then he married the other one. He divorced them. That's even not a good example because he argued with the falsehood, because he argued with the weak. But I mean, somebody he doesn't know how to present himself. This is very not right. Also, any arguing, even with the truth, for the truth, but there is no benefit from it. And this became very common among the fuqaha at one point. Like for example, there is this whole debate over, do you pray to the Kaaba or to the foundation of the Kaaba? Okay, so what's the point from all this debate? They said, if the Kaaba decide to walk away, قال ذهبت لزيارة أحد أولياء الله الصالحين. And I'm quoting. Said, Al-Kaaba decided to go visit one of Allah's wali, righteous. Do you follow the Kaaba when it's walking? Or do you stay at the Kaaba? I mean, that's ridiculous. That's unacceptable. Okay. For example, they raised a question, if a man, for somehow, he is a man but got pregnant and got a child and die, does the child inherit this as a father or inherit him as a mother? And you get all this arguing over stuff like that. That's not acceptable. Yeah, stuff like that. Someone asks you questions that most likely is somebody telling you, Sheikh, what about me praying in the top of Al-Kaaba? Ya akhi, you didn't go to Mecca even yet in your life. You talk about if I'm in the top of Al-Kaaba, how to pray. Or I am in the moon, or something like that. So this is, in this case, argumentation here is mira, has been recommended for you not to engage in. The second one is to argue for the falsehood with the falsehood. And that's what the Quran mentioned right after that. وَجَادَلُوا بِالْبَاطِلِ لِيُدْحِضُوا بِهِ الْحَقِّ. They argue with the falsehood to defeat the truth. And this is like the Ahlul Bid'ah, the innovators, the kuffar, the mushrikeen, when they defend their deities and their bid'ah. The third one, you argue with the truth for the falsehood. You argue with the truth, but for the falsehood. Like those who argue to show to basically stretch their muscles, to show that they win debate, because they used to get gifts from governments in the old days and the khulafa and so forth. So those people, yes, they use right evidence, correct methods, but their intention is corrupted. And those people, they might, Allah bring good through them, because Allah bring victory to Islam through even fajr, but that's wrong. And the last one is very, very important. It is arguing with the falsehood for the truth. And that's many of the mubtadi'ah like that. You have people argue with the mu'tazila, but with the falsehood, with the bid'ah. Raddul bid'ah bil bid'ah. They refute bid'ah with another bid'ah. That's absolutely not acceptable. To make up a hadith, to make up rules, and that's the door which is when it was open, a lot of bid'ah came into Islam because people thought because their intention is good, they want to refute the disbelievers or they want to refute the atheists. So they start making up their own rules, and that's their intention is good, but it became a bid'ah that they started in the religion. And I will end up with this very famous debater in the West here was doing a debate in Canada. And in the debate, the person who was debating him, professor, he raised something about al-qadar against that person. So that person in the debate said, oh, I got your point. I don't think Allah knows everything before it happened. He said, I think God only knows things before it happened, generally, not specifically. He came up with that bid'ah, and he was able to refute that claim at that point, even though it's weak, but he maybe got out of the point. But he used falsehood to refute that atheist who basically tried to raise doubt about the whole entire Islam. Not because you win that maybe debate or that point, it means you're correct. And guess what? This particular incident led that person later on to be very far away from the Sunnah. And he left the way of Ahlul Sunnah for a very long time. Alhamdulillah, lately he's started coming back. He's a good friend of mine, and I love this person for the sake of Allah. And I had a lot of talk with him about it. But he ended up going to so many areas far away. And that's very dangerous, to argue for the truth with that falsehood. Sayyid Qutb rahimahullah has a very good example. He used to say, he said that if you see a beautiful garden, you want to walk to it, you can't walk to it with a muddy feet, where you leave your footprints with your mud all over this beautiful garden. What you do, you make the garden looks ugly, looks bad. You know, and that's exactly the way people, when they have good intention, but they do things in the wrong way. You have to have the good intention and you have to have the right course of action. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yuwaffiqna wa iyyakum. And if this has been clear, you understand why the ulama rahimahullah, generally speaking, they don't like arguing. Because from the 4 scenarios, 3 are bad, and the only one left, half good and half bad. So that means that this door should be almost closed, and you should be very careful with that concept of arguing. In any nation, as the Prophet ﷺ said, you start arguing and not doing actions, Allah destroy them. And that would happen a lot in our community. We start argue a lot and we do a little. There is more to be said, inshallah, hopefully, in the coming classes.